now we'll move on to the next speaker, Mihir Keshari ji. Mihir Keshari ji is going to speak on the Nath Ascetics, Jats and temple communities, case studies from Delhi. This is a very important addition for the panel because Nath is a very important topic, Nath tradition. The mainstream Matha type of sannyasa is different from Nath sadhus, Naga sadhus, and all these traditions. We have one more paper by Dasan and Narasimha later about the Avadhuta tradition. So we have this diversity of topics, and Mihir Keshari ji is a wonderful researcher. He has earlier also presented highly rigorous, academically well-researched papers for INDICA conferences and events. And he has chosen a very specific topic of Natha sadhus and their association with temples. And a certain community, a jati called Jats. So it's a very specific, highly researched topic by Mihir Keshari ji. As usual, he is going to give you a very well-researched paper on the topic of Natha sadhus, their association with the temples in Delhi and Jat community. Thank you very much. Over to you, Sri Mihir Keshari.
The title of my presentation today is Nath Ascetics, Jats and Temple Community Case Studies from Delhi. So this presentation is part of my ongoing engagement or research with regard to temples and ascetics. This presentation of mine is basically a part of my ongoing research or engagement with temples here in Delhi. So this is just one part of it. So before I start my presentation, I just wanted to highlight that most of the panelists over here, they situated their studies in the domain of textual or scriptural analysis, so they tend to give an internal understanding of the traditions. However, my work is in more of a domain of anthropology and history, so it is more of an perspective of an external observer. I'm trying to situate what I observed in a historical and a sociological sense. So for this purpose, I have divided my paper into presentation into three parts. The first one is revisiting the historiography of Hindu temples, which basically argues that there has been an overemphasis on the political dimensions of Hindu temples, and I argue that Hindu temples should be seen as essentially social institutions, had a broader base, and were in constant engagement with other such institutions, such as ascetic and monastic traditions. In the second part of my presentation, I will focus on Hindu asceticism in society. And I will argue that the distinctiveness of Hindu asceticism was that it was never aloof or distant from the larger society. And I will highlight this aspect particularly by highlighting the linkages of Hindu temples with Hindu ascetic traditions. And in this background, I will take up my case studies, which are two here. One is of Talab Gorakhnath temple, which is situated in Katoria Sarai, New Delhi. And again, other is the Gangnath temple, which is situated in Munirka, New Delhi. So the broader aim here is to ethnographic studies of specific temples in Jat localities of Delhi. This discussion aims to locate and explore temples as spaces which facilitated the interaction of ascetic traditions with the larger society and the subsequent socio-cultural possibility that this presents, which is community formation in our field. Starting with the understanding of Hindu temples, there has been an extensive study of Hindu temples from art, historical, architectural, scriptural, ethnographic, and obviously historical sense. Early scholarship such as that of A.K. Kumaraswamy, Stella Cambridge, can be said to be located in the domains of architectural studies. However, the dominant historiography with respect to Hindu temples, particularly those emerging from post-independence era, appear to excessively emphasize the political element associated with temples, so as to deny other explanatory possibilities. So we have models of of theorizing society, for instance, the feudal model of R.S. Sarmadi and Jan others, who tend to situate Hindu temples within the larger feudal structure, as if they used to serve the purpose of state in controlling the society, and even in the even in the theoretical models which are not which are against feudal structure models, such as segmentary state model of Bertenstein, who theorized the state in South India, historical South India, and integrative model of B.D. Chattopadhyay and others. Temples and religion in general remains a tool in the hand of the political class to exercise control over the larger society, to cult integration and other cult appropriation and the other aspects. However, the shortcomings of the above approaches is that temples were never, only patronized by the royalty, right? We have evidences of temples being patronized by merchant groups, artisanal groups, widows, and women, and also ascetics themselves. So, Hindu temples had a broad base. They were, they were not just royal temples as such. So, we have recent studies with focus on exploring the social dimensions of temples. A recent work titled Rootless Handbook of Hindu Temples, Materiality, Social History and Practice, edited by Himanshu Prabhare and others, is very important work. This work reimagines the Hindu temple beyond the confines of its material form as a social space and places it not just within the broader social base but also within larger network of other such institutions. By visualizing the Hindu temples primarily as a space, as a social space rooted within the local communities for its sustaining, and as a dynamic institution which existed in interaction with other socio-cultural institutions, processes, and traditions, this theoretical intervention makes the social history of temples emerge. So basically, this theoretical intervention uh, aims to explore the social dimensions of Hindu temple, its larger social base, and the communities, and the ways the larger community engage with temple. And so, now coming to the understanding of asceticism, in general, the ascetic or renouncer can be understood as an individual who has chosen to live a life of penance, either as a wanderer or by joining an institution made for such purpose. This stands against the choice to live as a householder and is done for the attainment of certain goals, which is in the Indian religious context can range from attaining moksha, nirvana to attaining certain siddhis, particularly in the case of Nath yogis. Romila Thapar identifies an ascetic as someone who has opted out of society. He, she sees that the rise of ascetic tradition in Indian historical context was some sort of a counter culture. However, the notion that ascetic or renouncers opted out of society has been popularized by Louis Dumont, for whom the way of ascetic or renouncer was the way out of the world of Brahmanical caste order and hence society. But this holds only if our idea of society is limited to the world of householders, as pointed by Richard Burgon, who asserts that the view of Dumont and others on asceticism is from the perspective of the householders and not from the ascetics themselves, who in any case have diverse position on both caste structure as well as the householder tradition. From these brief pictures, obviously there has been more work on ascetic tradition, but from brief discussion here, what becomes clear is that a lot of discussion around the contrast between householder and the renouncer ascetic tradition is ideational in nature, in the sense that it is concerned with marking distinction within the sphere of ideas. However, this leaves unstudied the interaction between these two supposedly different structures and the possible sociological and historical implications of this interaction. This is because I think that there has been a lot of focus on studying the scriptural aspect or scriptural understanding of asceticism rather than scripture-centric understanding of ascetic tradition. If we understand ascetic tradition in its historical sense, we have to take into consideration other sources which are not directly concerned with ascetic tradition as such. For instance, epigraphy, art, architectural material, and other stuff. I here argue that the distinctness of Hindu ascetic tradition was its non-aloofness, non-distantness to society in historical terrain. This is particularly apparent in ascetic relations with temples, which then served as a space for interaction of ascetic tradition with the larger society, of which we have literary, epigraphical, and visual evidences. Nguyen Tsang noted the presence of many non-Buddhist ascetics identified as Pasupatas and Kapalikas in what he called as Deva temples. So I'm basically highlighting the linkages of ascetic tradition with temples. In the Katha Sarif Sagar and early medieval Kashmiri texts, we find reference to ascetic groups residing in temple shrines, which are located in both forest as well as urban centers. A 6th century inscription of Chalukya King Mangalet refers to the king making a grant for the maintenance of wandering ascetics. This grant was led at the time of installation of an image of Lord Vishnu in a cave temple. Even in visual depiction, we find ascetics associated with temples. For instance, in the 7th century relief of Arjuna's penance at Mahabalipuram, we find ascetics depicted around a shrine of Vishnu. This visual representation of ascetics in connection with temple science continues to exist even in the medieval and early modern period. A painting in the manuscript of Babarnama, commissioned by Akbar, depicts an encounter of Babar with Nath Ascetics at the shrine of Gurkhatri outside Peshawar. Gurkhatri emerged as an important pilgrimage site for Hindus of the region, and the painting shows ascetics surrounded by individual temple shrines. Similarly, a painting of Dhanaraj, which can be dated to 1595 CE, depicts an ascetic sitting with a temple sign in the background. We have other examples of such visual depictions. This showcase that the linkages between ascetics and temple from 1960s of ours, and even in the colonial period, depiction of ascetics in colonial paintings become highly individualized. So there is a problem in getting the background information. However, some paintings do give some visual clue about background of these ascetics. A company painting catalogued by Millard Archer by an artist Banilal from Patna and belonging to 1880 CE depicts a Hindu fakir with an arm raised, and in the background stands a temple. Clues about such interaction are not limited to visual sources alone, but even in the literary sources such as Sufi hagiographies or colonial ethnography, we find ascetics associated with temple shrines. The above discussion should suffice the point the linkages between temples and Hindu ascetic tradition. We are going to see some images as well. The reason behind this arduous task of tracing historical linkages between ascetic tradition and temples up to the from early historic to early modern period is because there is a tendency often found in historians and scholars of modern India to project that everything of this period is somehow related to colonialism in the subcontinent, as is often in scholars who study colonial society. Since it is very much possible for a tradition or a phenomenon which is manifested in modern period to have deep historical roots in the period long before the colonial period, this is not to deny the significant and obvious impact of colonialism on various traditions of some continents, but the thing is, I wanted to highlight that the interaction of ascetics with temples is far before the onset of colonialism. So here are some paintings. This is the famous Gur Khatri. You can see small temples. There are other paintings as well which showcase that small Sivalingas in these small signs. And here is another painting. You can see small here, a temple over here. Now, in this background, basically, I situated Hindu temples in the larger social context, and I showcased that it was somehow linked with ascetic traditions. Like the ascetic traditions were not aloof to the larger societies, and temples were in constant engagement with them. And this actually, showcases the possibility of larger community interaction. So here is my first study, a case study. I will be taking the case study of Guru Gorakhnath Ram Talab temple. This is some of the images from the temple. I will discuss this sculpture as well. So yeah, here is the temple. Here is the Nath Ascetic, and here is the idol of Guru Gorakhnath. So to start with, Guru Gorakhnath Ram Talab Mandir is possibly one of the oldest temples of Delhi. The antiquity of the place, independent of the legends attached to it, can be observed from some of the material findings as well as its surroundings. So you see here this image is of Yogini, right? I have written a small report about it, and I have dated it to somewhere around 9th to 11th century. This was found here. And interestingly, this area is located not far from Qutub complex, Qutub Minar, and there is a possibility of a Yogini shrine situated over here. So, so this attests the antiquity of the place. But anyway, uh, most of the structure, including the temple, is of late medieval to modern period. According to the local legends, in the Sati Yuga, this place, along with adjacent Sanjayvan forest, was where Guru Gorakhnath performed austerities. However, after demise of Prince Prithviraj Chauhan, this place, not unlike other Hindu spaces, was destroyed by the invading army. This is as per the legend. It was only in the 19th century that a worship was rekindled by efforts of Harsukh Sahib, whose father was Baba Nehru. Harsukh Sahib is considered as belonging to the Sansanwal Jat community. According to the legend, Harsukh once took his cows to where they wandered away beyond reach. Frustrated, Harsukh was helped by Guru Gorakhnath, who reunited him with his cows. He then instructed Harsukh to dig a pond where he was to find ancient sculptures and to establish a temple over there. However, at first the villagers of Katariya Sarai did not believe Harsukh and ridiculed him. But later Gorakhnath himself gave darshan to some villagers and reminded them of his instructions and also asked them to perform life cycle rituals of their community at this temple itself rather than going to a far distant shrine of Haridas. Hence a pond was dug out which yielded three ancient images and was named as Ram Talab. So this is the pond, Ram Talab. Uh, After death of Harsukh Sahib in 1876, the temple was handed over to the wandering Nath Ascetics, in whose hands the temple complex still exists, with Munsi Nath as the first Mahant who established the Dhoni or the sacred fire wheel. Currently, the temple complex can be said to divide into three zones, the old and the new temple structure and the pond. So this is the new structure of the temple, and this is known as Gorakh Medi. This, the one on the right, is the old structure, and this is the pond, Ramtala pond. While the complex is maintained by the ordained Nath Man, who is also head of all the affairs of the temple complex, including those of the temple complex housing the augurs. It appears that the story, much like the temple itself, is a later appropriation by Nath Ascetics. Among other reasons, the character of Harsukh is attached to the Nath Sampradaya only through the episode of Darshan of Gorakhnath. He is not initiated as a Nath yogi, which is usually the case with Nath present. Moreover, from the legend itself, it is clear that the place was appropriated by Nath only after death of Harsukh. The decision to abandon the tradition of going to the shrine of Baba Haridas at Dharoda Kalan for the performance of uh, life cycle rituals also appear to be a part of sectarian competition for patronage. Whatever be the case, what matters for our purpose is the role of temple shrine along with Nath ascetics in forging and perpetuating a sense of community. Today, Gorakhnath serves as a patron deity of various villages around the shrine, particularly those belonging to the Jats. The legend attached to the shrine constantly emphasizes the linkages of the temple shrine with the village of Katwariya Sarai, along with its residents community. The shrine has emerged as an important center for performance of life cycle rituals by villagers such as Mundan of children. The surrounding shrine are dotted by some small hollow cubicles of pyramid-like structures known as Than or Bhuyi. So here you can see these small hollow cubicles. These are known as Than of Jat ancestors, and they are dotted and they surround the temple complex, particularly the pond area. Uh, the presence of these structures shows the role played by the temple shrine in facilitating socio-cultural amalgamation and forging a unified identity. Apart from its ritual and religious significance, the temple appears to be an active social space. It is not uncommon to find Nath ascetics sharing the same hookah with Jat elders of the region on the temple premises. So here in Haryana and Delhi, communities like Jats and Gujars, they have a cultural practice of smoking hookah, right? So if you go to the temple in evening, you can observe that Nath ascetics and Jat, share the same hookah. This identity is further invigorated periodically by organization of bhandara, performance of tapas rituals by the residing mahant, through visit of members of Nath Jamaat, and through biannual melas. After every 6 monthly Navratri, a mela is organized by the shrine, with the help of villagers. This mela invites participation of 12 villages and Nath ascetics from across North India who also visit the shrine. So, as already mentioned, the individual figure of neither Harsuk nor ascetic of the lineage is emphasized beyond a certain point. Rather, the tradition projects itself as deriving authority directly from the larger Nath tradition by making Gorakhnath as its central figure. This is understandable as the temple shrine continues to operate within the ambit of institutionalized Nath Sampradaya with an active ascetic lineage. In our next study, we will see that a case study of a defunct shrine where no ascetic lineage is maintained as of now. So the next study is of Baba Gangnath temple. This is the Gangnath temple, and this is the idol of Bhagwan whatever, Gangnath ji, and this is the dried up pond. The historical foundation. This Gangnath temple is situated in Munirka. So the historical foundation of village of Munirka can be traced back to the 15th century CE and is attributed to Rod Singh, the ancestor of Tokas Jats of the Munirka. According to an article in Jat Samaj Patrika, which bases its claims on Bhatta Grantha, according to the legends reflected in the article, Munirka is the ancient times of the place where Baba Ganganath, a Nath ascetic, performed austerity. Today, a relatively large temple complex stands at the same place, next to a dried up pond. The temple was renovated in 1986-88. The tradition associated with Ganganath is very popular in the region of western Nepal and Uttarakhand. And it is interesting to see the percolation of this tradition here in Delhi. The legend associated with Baba Ganganath in Munita are rather strange. Apart from the linkages to the Nath Sampradaya, people are not much aware about him. This is possibly because there is a break in the ascetic lineage. I was informed that a small Shiva shrine lying next to the pond was occupied by Nath Ascetics. However, for some unknown reason, this temple was deserted by Nath Ascetics, and it was only in the late 1980s that it was expanded into the larger temple complex, and a Brahmin priest was appointed to take care of it. Today, the temple houses a samadhi and an idol of Baba Ganganath, along with that of other Nath Mahants, namely Baba Abhandanath and Sushil Nath. Possibly, the earlier temple site was initially occupied by these Nath ascetics, who later introduced the tradition of Ganganath. Though there is an apparent break in the ascetic lineage, nevertheless, the figure of Ganganath is still central to the identity of the temple and for the people of Munirka and its residents. Today, in the narrow lanes of Munirka village, there is hardly a house without a place which hails Ganganath. The association of Ganganath with the village is evident from the legend which tells that whenever there was a possibility of a drought in the village, a bhandara in the name of Ganganath was organized next to the pond, and this resulted in rain. Similarly, the article dedicated to Ganganath emphasizes its connection with the village of Munitsa. Today, uh, so unlike earlier case studies, no exclusive mela is dedicated to temple or the tradition of Ganganath. But I was informed that on the festival of Janmashtami, a wrestling competition is organized by within the temple complex with the help of temple trust, which is maintained by the village members. So, So to conclude, the above brief discussion of the case study shows the importance of temple science in facilitating interaction between ascetic tradition and the larger society. In the first section, I have tried to argue for a new understanding of Hindu temples, which is not limited to mere material structure of the temple and the role of the royalty Brahmana duo in establishing and maintaining it. Rather, I have argued for an understanding which reimagines Hindu temples as social institutions which were in dynamic interaction with other such institutions and had a wide social base. This understanding includes village and local science within its purview. In the second section dealing with Hindu ascetic tradition, I have tried to showcase the possible linkages between ascetic tradition and temple. Finally, in the third section, dealing with the case studies, I have tried to understand through ethnographic studies the phenomenon of temple asceticism and the possible socio-cultural impact of the phenomenon, which our studies sought to include the community formation. Apart from my study being important for the understanding of Hindu temples and ascetic tradition, it is also important with respect to studies, historical studies on Delhi. Studies on Delhi have been, concentrated to Shahjahanabad and, understanding Islamic state culture. However, there has a lot to be researched and to be written upon Delhi, which can reveal, alternatives as well. So, with this, I conclude my presentation.
That was really wonderful. Uh, Such a very highly specific topic of a specific part of the country called Delhi, and a very specific aspect of contribution of sannyasis to temple culture, and a very specific focus on a certain tradition of sannyasa, the Natha tradition. So that was really very useful coverage of a very focused research on a wonderful topic, good topic.